Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we are covering a game that is near and dear to Mike's heart that I don't have a whole lot of experience with, but it's a spooky game that we've talked a little bit about, but now we're going to go into excruciating detail on Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem.
That's right, and the keyword is excruciating.
Excruciating, because it is a very scary game, and I think there's a lot of pain in it, emotional and physical.
And mental. So do you are you ever like on the trend, Tyler? You ever felt like you're on the trend, of something?
I don't know what that means. On the
like
trend.
You're participating in something before it's cool, I guess.
Oh yeah, do I ever feel like a hipster? All the time.
Okay, because this game is that for me, surprisingly enough, because I played this game when it came out, which we'll find out kind of rare, actually. In a weird way, surprisingly. So, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem not only qualifies as our last spooky game for this October, but also as an abandoned franchise because Nintendo has this IP and they have done nothing with it.
Ooh, and that's spooky in its own right.
That is spooky. Well, they've done one thing very recently, which we'll talk about, but it's very small. So, also, I feel like Silicon Knights as a studio is something we should definitely talk about at some point. So that's something that I kind of put on the list as something we could do in the future when we talk more about studios, because this is their one big game, but they had others.
They did a lot of stuff. They seemed like they were going to be a really big studio, but then they just kind of didn't. Yeah, and they just kind of weren't. So let's get into the grime facts here, and then we'll kind of go into more detail in a bit. But the developer is Silicon Knights. The game came out in North America on June 24th, 2002. October 25th, 2002 in Japan, and in Europe on November 1st, 2002. It is only on GameCube. We'll talk about the best way to play this game later, though, so just keep that in mind. It only sold 500... Actually, it said less than 500,000 copies is what I've read. So it could have only sold one to you.
Yeah, and they've had no re-releases to it. My friend... I guess I should say how I played it. So I played this as a kid. I mentioned this last episode, I think, in Alaska. My friend bought it for GameCube, and because he was he was hyping it up, like he read like Nintendo Power and was on top of the magazines, and he heard about this game and he was really excited about it. So we played it together. I played barely because I don't like spooky games. It was mostly me watching him, but it definitely got us many times, is what I'll say. It's a third-person survival horror. There are some similarities between Resident Evil and Silent Hill, but that's definitely something we will also be going into because they're very different in certain ways. Specifically how the camera works. So we'll talk about that down in the gameplay side of things. The average time to beat this game is 17 to 36 hours.
Wow, that's
depending on how completionist you want to get with it. Pretty long for like this generation, early 2000s.
Yeah, well, and for a spooky game, I feel like the scares, like, you can only pack them in so tightly,
There's 100 floors of frights. They can't all be winners.
That's right. That's right.
But there is no Metacritic score for this game, so because it came out in 2002. But the big name publications, if you want to call them that, like IGN, GameSpot, Game Informer at the time, gave it a 9 or higher.
Nice.
Some of them gave it a 9.5. But let's talk about the plot real quick, because that kind of sums up what's going on. So while you play as many different characters in Eternal Darkness, the main character that you play as is Alexandra Roivas. Roivas? How do you spell that? Roivas, savior backwards. Yeah, we're doing something here. And just as important, this is in the year 2000 when you play as Alexandra Roivas. The time is very important because your grandfather, Edward Roivas, is mysteriously murdered in his giant Rhode Island mansion because H.P. Lovecraft was from Rhode Island, is my guess. Not happy with the police findings, Alexandra does what any normal person would decide to do and try to solve her grandfather's murder that night by rummaging through his stuff. We got some real true crime nerd energy going on with Alexandra Roivas before it was cool. So, she stumbles on the Tome of Eternal Darkness, which is essentially like a Necronomicon kind of thing, And it's bound in human skin. It's really gross. Yes, super spooky. Already spooky. This description enough is so scary. I'm sorry. I'll make it quicker. Okay, so she reads the book, and you play the memories that she's reading, essentially. I won't get into the whole plot because there's a lot there, but the characters that you play as, I will talk about, and there are 12 in total. That's not true at all. There aren't 12 in total based on this list I have right here. I don't know why I wrote that number down. There's like 8 in total. Here we go. Pius Augustus, who was a Roman general in Persia in 26 BC. Elia, who was a court dancer in Cambodia in 1150 AD. Karim, who is a Persian swordsman in 565 AD. Anthony, who is a messenger for Charlemagne in 814 AD. Edwin Lindsay, who is an archaeologist in 1983. Very Indiana Jones vibes, by the way. Michael Edwards, who is 1991 Canadian firefighter who was sent to the Middle East to extinguish fires during the Gulf War. Very specific. Edward Roivas, 1952, clinical psychologist. So those are who I wrote down there. And you also play as Alexander. They are all connected, and some of their paths cross as you play as them. So, but you jump times, and that's all I'm going to say about the plot. I think this game's plot holds up enough that it's still worth, like, I would say for the story, if you're a horror story kind of person and you like cosmic horror specifically, this might be for you. You know, this game might be for you. You never played it before. Gameplay wise, Eternal Darkness is set in the third person, but unlike other third person horror games of the time, like Resident Evil, the camera is fixed, as the player can't move the camera, but the perspective is not fixed. So in Resident Evil, the camera only changes when you go out of view and it like changes scenes. But in Eternal Darkness, the camera perspective follows you. So you can't control the camera, but it does follow you. Overall, I think it makes the game look a lot smoother. It also adds like a sense of mystery for horror too, because you can't like look ahead. You know, if you could move the camera, you could look ahead.
And they can probably time jump scares and stuff like that, like by what you can't see if they have control.
Yeah, which I think is also why Resident Evil is so scary too, because you change scenes and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a monster right there. You know, it like can get you. So combat is cool in the game because while you can swing blindly if you want to, there's also like a very simple targeting system where if you target a certain part of an enemy, things will happen. Like if you decapitate an enemy, they can't they're blinded, cut off a limb. They can't use that to attack you. You can also aim for certain weak spots to just do more damage in general. So that's something you kind of learn throughout the game is like different enemies and what types you have to do. There's an inventory as well. That's different than a lot of games at the time where you could like store key items that will help you as a player to solve like puzzles. Different from this genre, I should say. But the other thing about this game is there are cure items that restore magic, health, or sanity. And we're going to get to sanity soon. So that's really the big part of this. These items are really just like the items that have spells bound to them, so you can cast these. In fact, they're kind of the way you need to play the game because it makes the game a lot easier to have these items, and you can get them relatively early, like a sword or something that like heals you. I'm just making an example. That's not something in the game, but like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What is most cool to me about Eternal Darkness, and something I did not understand when I was playing this as a child, is the spell system in Eternal Darkness is pretty unique and pretty complex. So you use runes and you match these runes to make a spell, and you would find scrolls in the story that would give you the rune combinations for some spells. But if you had the runes before you got the scroll, you could just figure it out.
Oh, that's
on your own. So essentially, you could figure out higher level spells early on in the game, and it would make your life easier, which I think is really, if you played with this spell system, it would reward you.
Or if you were playing the game again, you could almost have a lot more stuff going in because you would
you could just jump right into it. Yeah, which I think is really cool because that's something that I don't think I've seen in a lot of other games. Maybe I'm wrong though. I could be completely wrong on this. Again, someone's screaming into their headphones right now, like, why are you not talking about this game that has a unique spell system? For example, Morrowind, Elder Scrolls had a very good fun spell system that they don't do in Elder Scrolls games anymore. But I like a detailed spell system that encourages you to like experiment and find things out. And that's exactly what Eternal Darkness did with these runes and these combinations. Also, some combat encounters and puzzles, like you had to know a spell to make it work and to proceed. So the game kind of would test you on like, how well do you know magic in this universe, which I think is kind of cool. It's important to note, too, that as you play through the game, you'll usually take breaks in between these chapters where you're playing as people other than Alexandra, and then you are Alexandra in the mansion. And these are like way less intense story-wise chapters, but things start to get spookier as it goes along. Ooh, scary ghost stuff. So there you go. Another fun thing about the setting is that you repeat the same setting a lot in a memory, but there's time in between. So when you play as Aaliyah, for example, you're in this relatively fresh, new-looking Cambodian temple, and then when you come back as Edwin Lindsay in 1983, it is a decrepit ruin, but the map is still the same. The details are just different.
That's cool.
Which, yeah, it's kind of like a way to connect these stories together also. There are technically 3 branches of the game Eternal Darkness, 3 plot branches. At the beginning, you make a choice. I'm not going to say what that choice is, but that choice does change many puzzles, combat, and dialogue experiences that you have in the game. And when you beat the game with one of these branches, the next time you play through the game, that branch is locked, and you have to choose the 2 other branches. And then I wonder if that means something happens when you beat all 3 branches.
Ooh,
Tyler?
I bet it does.
Ooh, I bet something happens, and I know what it is, and I'm not going to tell you. So yeah, you should play the game. If you're into horror games, though, seriously, this is me selling this game to you right now, because I think this is a horror game that really stands the test of time and does well. Obviously, it's still an older game. It's going to be frustrating at times because it's an older game, but it's got some cool stuff in it that I think is really neat. Specifically, the Sanity System. This is the big thing that the game sells you on. So you have a magic meter with a K to cast spells. You have a health meter for your health. And then you have this green bar. That's your sanity. And your sanity meter, essentially, when it gets low, you have sanity effects happen to you because you're going insane, essentially.
How does it?
No
how
better
do
way
you
to put it.
lose sanity? Is it
You
like
lose sanity
predetermined,
by
or-
seeing monsters, like just
Okay.
looking at monsters, looking at horrors, going into new rooms and seeing monsters. Like it's goes down based on things in the game that would essentially make someone lose their sanity. You know, like if you're anything that's not normal to the player, like a monster or a scary moment or like jump scare, like that could lower your sanity too. And I got a lot of examples. In fact, I think I got almost every example of a sanity effect from the Eternal Darkness fandom wiki, because it turns out I know people like don't like that we use Wikipedia sometimes in this show, but fan-made wikis on sites like Fandom are amazing to find gameplay things, because those people that love the game and they're making this wiki and they have so many of the sanity effects listed on the room. So for example, like when you enter a room, your character can turn into a zombie and quote die or whatever, you know. You can try to cast like a spell and your torso would just explode, making like a fake death. These are all fake deaths, by the way. It just like is meant to scare you. But those are like in the game things. But what Eternal Darkness does best and what it's known for is doing sanity effects that mess with you, like in real life as a human being. And that's what this game is known for. So sometimes, for example, the game will turn the volume down in the game, but it puts up a fake volume bar to make it look like your TV is turning your volume down.
Wow.
When it's not. It will fake your screen going off. It will look like bugs are crawling inside or on the TV screen.
Ooh.
Like over it. Well, this is so funny. Trick-or-treaters just showed up at my house, and I was like so scared just now because I was mentioning this scary stuff, and now, okay, they're here. It's fine. We're recording this on Halloween, everyone. Could it get more spooky? Okay. Another thing it does is it will change like the video mode. Like it'll go to like change the input on your TV. It'll fake that. It'll fake a screen message that will make it look like you finished the demo for the game. And then it'll be like, check out the new sequel, Eternal Darkness Sanity's Redemption, or whatever. It does some really funny stuff. It'll also, this is the biggest one it does though. Well, there's one more. It blue screens of death. It'll do that. But then it will pull up the save screen and you'll have a choice to save your game or delete. No matter what button you push, it will delete your game. And it's really not deleting your game. It's faking it. But it's doing that to mess with you as a player, which I think is fantastic.
So like 2 a.m., you're like, you haven't saved in a while. You're pretty tired. And then the game pretends it's deleting your save file. And you're like, no.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. Like it makes me so happy. Like it's playing pranks on you. Like this game plays pranks on you. And that was, to me, the coolest thing about this game and why it scared me so much. We had the TV turn off when I was playing with my friend. we got the save delete file thing when we were playing. Like we got all this stuff, and it was so frightening as like a child to be like, what is happening? Why is it acting all weird? And we had no idea because we didn't read about it and we didn't know because it was the early 2000s. You know, we're not reading the internet and knowing what's going on. So it's just really fun. And those are the like things that happen to the player. There's a lot more things that happen. Like sometimes you can enter a room and the environment will just be upside down, or blood will drip from the walls. But I think the one that is most important are these like ones that mess with you as a player. Like, not your character, you in real life. I think that's fun.
Yeah, that sounds like if it catches you at the right time and you're not ready for it, it could really mess with you, especially if you didn't know it was coming, if you were playing the game when it first came out, you didn't read anything about it on the internet, because who was reading things about games on the internet in 2002? I could see that really messing with you and being pretty fun once you sort of figured out what was going on.
Yeah, like it's just a really cool idea for a game. So we're going to talk about the development now of the game. And so Silicon Knights had made some pretty great games before Eternal Darkness. Their most recent was Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, which is still like a cult classic to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's considered
like
a pretty good game, I think. That whole series is that. Did they make the other ones too? There was like a Soul Reaver game and a couple of Soul Reaver games, I think.
I'm not entirely sure because they had some stuff happen to them like later on down the line that we don't really get into, like all studios do. You know, they have stuff happen to them, but where they're bought and things move around. But they're really known for Blood Omen Legacy of Kain and Eternal Darkness. Those are the big ones, I would say. But this, like, they were an up and comer in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. In fact, I think, Tyler, we've talked about, like, in person, not on the show, about how it's really weird that this is not a bigger game studio now today.
Yeah. They did the Twin Snakes, too.
Yeah, that was the other thing. They started doing Metal Gear. Yeah. And Metal Gear comes back into play pretty shortly. We're going to talk about that in a second on this episode, which I know is going to excite you because you're a gearhead.
I am a gearhead, as they say. That's what
that's what everyone says. Yeah. So, okay, there's a great article in The Escapist that I used, by the way, for this part that I found it's just called There's a Lot More to Tell. It came out in 2006. It was written by Shannon Drake. And it interviews the then president of Silicon Knights, Dennis Dyack, who's kind of known as like Eternal Darkness dad. He's the one that made this up, and he's the one that ran the show.
Yeah, I think he did a lot of like early role-playing game stuff too. Like he's right up there with like some of the D&D guys. I think maybe I'm making that up. Ooh. I
don't know. No, well, Gary Gygax is the guy that made D&D. Is that why? Because it sounds similar.
Yeah, maybe that was it.
Gygax.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
It might be Gygax.
Gary Gygax.
Can you look that up for me? And I just screwed up D&D creator's name. Now I feel like a horrible nerd. Okay. But there's a passage from from this article that kind of just sums up the whole creation of Eternal Darkness and why it happens, and I'm going to read it to you right now. So here it goes. Quote, Eternal Darkness was something that kind of came together. At that point, there had been a lot of horror games, specifically survival horror, and we wanted to create something that was in the horror genre, but not categorized as survival horror. There was another reason, too, something less lofty. He says, at the same time, and this is still ongoing, video games were under fire for messing with people's heads and being accused of being murder simulators and stuff. So we thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to make something that really does mess with people's heads? End quote. So that was the whole idea behind Eternal Darkness. We're just going to mess with the player. Because, yeah, there's a lot of, like, this is kind of right around, like, violence in video games. Video games are horrible. They're ruining children and stuff. You know, like, it has been forever. They're still going on with that. But they're like, we're actually going to make a game that does this, you know? And Eternal Darkness does that, I think. They go on to talk about the Sanity System in the article. And this is where Shannon Drake goes on to say, and she's quoting Dennis Dyack here at certain times. So Dennis says, we really wanted to create something that messed with people's heads, Dennis said. So we had these ideas, and hallucinations had been done before. And so the whole idea that we could make it so that as you saw things, you slowly lose your sanity, it would change the way the game would play. That was something that we thought people would really enjoy. Lovecraft's name comes up again, and he says, if you look at Lovecraft or the Call of Cthulhu games, in their sort of mythos, when you lose your sanity, it was really bad, and it usually meant that you would die. Eternal Darkness is the opposite. It's actually really fun. And we found in focus testing that people would want to go insane. And so there's things like that, just exploring the fascination. Citing gaming as a form of escapism, he brings up a rhetorical question. What if you could go insane for fun? End quote. Right. And I just love that because, yeah, it is true. Like, have you ever played a Call of Cthulhu game, Tyler?
No, I haven't.
I played one of the board games for it. It is so hard. Like when you go insane in the game, you're just done. Like the game's going to end. You know, you're going to lose. And you usually do lose. It's a co-op game. You usually lose. And it's just like, and so it is true that Eternal Darkness, because when it says you die in these hallucinations, like if you should go home, if you want to do one thing for this episode, Google all the sanity effects and just read through them if you're not going to play the game, because they are funny. Like you just explode randomly, you know, but you're fine. You know, you're just going crazy. So you go back to normal afterward. I just think that's really fun. And it's also funny to note that they did focus testing and found out that people wanted to go insane.
That's great. Yeah.
That is great. Another fun focus testing nugget in that article that I'm not going to like quote from it, but they mentioned is that the volume slowly turning down on your TV fooled everyone, including the people that made the game. Like it would fool them sometimes because they forgot they put it in there. And that's the only sad thing I'm going to say about this game is because it was designed for old TVs, not really fooling anyone anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and when they were making it, they probably made it emulate whatever TV they were like testing it on too. So it probably actually looked like that to them if they, you know what I mean? Like nowadays, or even back in the day, the volume bar that they would put up on the screen was like, if it was different from the one that your TV normally had, you might not have been fooled, you know?
Yeah, so it's just that's not really going to hold up. But I think you should play this game anyway because the story's fun and it's just a fun horror game. It is funny in ways that you die as much as it is scary. Now, if you're a child, it would definitely be scary still, I think. Another thing I want to focus on though in development is the amazing voice cast, and this is the Tyler fact of the episode because they took so many voice actors from Metal Gear Solid because they loved Metal Gear Solid and they just wanted that voice cast. You have Jennifer Hale, Fem Shep in Mass Effect, and Naomi Hunter in Metal Gear Solid. She's in there. Cam Clark, Big Boss, he's in there. David Hayter, Solid Snake, he's in there. There are like 10 other people that have been in Metal Gear games that are on this list. It's like almost all Metal Gear people that do the Eternal Darkness voiceover. So
that's awesome.
If anything, I feel like Tyler, you should just play the game for that.
Just for all these Metal Gear voice actors.
Yeah, and it's just because they played Metal Gear and they're like, this is great voice acting. So they hired them to do the voice acting for the show, for the game, which I think is just fantastic. So, all right, with that, I am now going to go into some other quick facts about Eternal Darkness development that we should talk about. So originally, this was going to be made for the N64, which I thought was funny. And they actually have playtest footage of the N64 version. Spoilers, it'll look terrible.
I wish that stuff would leak, like the Dinosaur Planet N64 ROM that leaked. I love when that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, we just have screenshots is what we have that's leaked. Bad. Yeah, we don't have a build. But they went to the GameCube because they saw like what they could do with it. And they really it looks good for the GameCube. Like they did a great job making it like work with the hardware and making it look nice. Just like most games at this time period, it was delayed because of 9/11. The development team actually ended up cutting a quarter of the game's content that featured like Arab settings. So this includes deleting the character that you see in those N64 screenshots, who was named Joseph de Malay. He was a member of the Knights Templar, and they removed that whole arc from the game because they didn't want to reference the Crusades so close to the 9/11 terror attacks.
Wow.
And then that character was then replaced with Kareem the Swordsman, who I mentioned before. There is also, in the story, there are the Ancient Ones, which are like the cosmic horrors that we're talking about. There's a fifth one that is not really mentioned in the story. And the rumor is, and he was cut out of the story, but this was the Ancient One that would have shown up in the sequel. Gotcha. If the sequel ever happened, which we're about to get into right now. But yeah, we'll find out that sequel never happened. So here comes the quick legacy of Eternal Darkness as a franchise. The main reason we don't have Eternal Darkness sequel is because, like many things, money. Eternal Darkness, while critically well received, did not sell very well.
Dang, that's too bad.
Yeah, I got 500,000 copies, and this was a Nintendo product. So Nintendo was looking at the sales. It was only on GameCube, and it didn't do well. And they were like, okay, well, we're not going to make a second one. In fact, they had a sequel. They were working on it, and then Nintendo pulled it. And Nintendo still owns the Eternal Darkness IP and the Sanity System. They are both owned by Nintendo. They trademarked it. the Sanity System. Like it's like theirs. Yeah.
I wonder how different it would have gone if the game had come out on PS2 and Xbox.
Yeah, I mean, that might have saved it.
It's like a different audience, right?
It's a totally different audience. The fact that this was also like I didn't really mention this above. I should have. This is a horror game on Nintendo. Like this, it's never been a thing.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. The only time we've seen Nintendo use a Eternal Darkness property is in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Alexandra Roivas is a unlockable spirit in the spirit mode of the game. So she has a card that does something. You can level her. I think she's a green one, the grapple spirit. So she's in there. So they used the property recently.
All right.
Technically. So there have been some attempts by Dennis Dyack to recover and revive the franchise. They had a Kickstarter campaign for a spiritual successor called Shadow of the Eternals. That failed. And it's a really weird process of how it happened. So they asked for $1.5 million on Kickstarter, and then they had a separate PayPal donation button, and they left it up for a month, went from May to June, and then they took it down because they said they had some exciting new opportunities. So then they paid everyone back. Like they just gave everyone their money back, which is cool, that you did that. Gave everyone, refund everybody.
Yeah.
Because you have something new happening. Then one of the co-designers of Eternal Darkness and Shadow of the Eternals was arrested and pleaded guilty on charges of child pornography.
Whoa.
So that ruined the studio on top of that. So they then cut ties with him. They cut ties from the guy, obviously, publicity move. They're like, no, didn't know this about this guy. We're not working with him ever again, obviously. Then Precursor did a third crowdfunding campaign for Shadow of the Eternals later on after this for $750,000, and then that failed. And then Dyack changed the name of Precursor to Apocalypse Studios, which is what they are now. They still exist. And they are making a free-to-play game called Deadhouse Sonata. If anyone's interested in Dennis Dyack's work or those kind of games or horror games, it is a horror game. You can Google it. Deadhouse is spelled Deadhaus, Sonata. Apocalypse was originally supposed to work on Shadow of the Eternals, but then they sidelined it for Deadhouse Sonata. So here's my theory: is Deadhouse Sonata is a free-to-play game. And my guess is they're doing this to fund Shadow of the Eternals. I could see it still happening, but again, it's 20 years since it came out, almost.
Yeah,
Almost 20 years. It's a very long time. Does it still
but it
hold
sort of
up?
gained cult status, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it got really big cult status, especially among horror game fans. It's well regarded as one of the best horror games on the GameCube, probably is the best horror game on the GameCube, but around that generation for sure.
I'm surprised they don't do a re-release to gauge interest, right? I think it would sell a lot more if Nintendo put a copy of it out on the Switch of just a port or an HD sort of remaster. I think it would do really well, and then that would give them reason to make a sequel because it's a different world now than the world that game was released into.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I totally agree with you. It's very odd. It's also odd that we just don't see a way to play it. This kind of rolls right into this. So how do you play this game now? Well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that a copy of Eternal Darkness for GameCube, because this was never reprinted and only a certain number of copies were made, goes from anywhere from $50 to $100 on eBay, depending on the quality. Pretty pricey. Now for the good news, and the first time we have ever done this on the podcast. You should emulate this game, is what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, after buying a legitimate copy, of course.
After buying a legitimate, totally fine copy. You spend $50 to $100 on eBay, and then you put the Dolphin emulator on your computer, and it turns out this game runs very well in the Dolphin emulator. It's known to running really well. So I would say that you legally purchase this game and emulate it on Dolphin, so that way you don't have to worry about a GameCube. Unless you have a GameCube, and then you're good.
Yeah,
But
you can just play it.
Yeah, I also it's so interesting to me that this was such a big game that it's just been abandoned. And Nintendo now should know this buzz. Like they should know that this is like a thing that they could sell again. And it's very odd too, because this is when Nintendo went into the horror. And Nintendo had always been kiddie games up to this point, I feel like, except for Conker's Bad Fur Day, like you said.
Yeah, there were a few like exceptions.
Outliers, yeah. And this is definitely one of the big outliers. So this is an abandoned franchise, spooky game, very scary.
Yeah.
And it's got a pretty good story. I want to go into it more, but I feel like I don't want to spoil it for people because the story I think is actually worth it.
All right.
What are my sources I used for this? I used the Eurogamer article that I mentioned. Oh no, the Escapist article I mentioned. There's a lot more to tell. There's also a Eurogamer article called Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, a retrospective that came out in 2014. That's a really good article to read if you're interested in this. There is also, if you want to just get the plot that I'm talking about and not play the game, there is a video called Eternal Darkness Plot Explained by Sweet Lou Gaming on YouTube. And lastly, there is a really cool YouTuber named Ragnarrox, Ragnarrox, who does long, real dive-in documentary videos about horror games. And he does one on Eternal Darkness called Eternal Darkness, the greatest Lovecraft game nobody played.
Wow.
And I mean, he's right though. It's this game is cosmic horror at its best, if you're into that. And I think if you are into like any H.P. Lovecraft, Call of Cthulhu game styles, that you should really try this game out. It's really cool. Or at least like maybe watch a couple of YouTube videos of long plays of it. Because that's what I did. Because I was like, I'm not going to pay $100 for a GameCube copy. So I'm just going to watch videos to get my memory back. Because, yeah, that was probably 20 years ago. I was sitting in my friend's room watching this get play. So, yeah, it's a really cool game. But that is our last spooky season game.
All right.
I hope I did it justice.
Do you know what happened to Silicon Knights? As
they
a company?
Disbanded. I think they got bought. They disbanded, and then it was like, or it might have even
There
actually.
was a whole.
Well, no.
I could tell you if you want.
Yeah, if you know, yeah. I just know they made Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, and then something else happened.
Yeah, they went on to make Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. Then they made a game called Too Human, which has its own. That's probably worth its own podcast of like the disaster that Too Human was. But what ended up happening was that before that game came out, Silicon Knights sued Epic Games for, quote, failure to provide a working game engine. And they went back and forth in court, like over Unreal Engine 3, because I guess Epic wouldn't help them or something. There's a whole section on like the internet about this. But basically they were suing each other back and forth. And in the end, Silicon Knights had to destroy all of their game code that they used with Unreal Engine 3. Which meant that they couldn't sell Too Human anymore. It had been out for a few years, and like they basically lost a ton of work that they had been working on, and they had to the games were recalled from stores, and they had to destroy all unsold retail copies of games built with Unreal 3 engine code, which was Too Human, X-Men Destiny, and a couple other games that they'd made.
So that's because they lost the lawsuit, I'm guessing?
Yeah, they lost this lawsuit, and they were just destroyed, like fully destroyed because of that.
Wow. Yeah. So I actually had a phone call with Dennis Dyack when I was working in the marketing company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is kind of, it's like, it's not even really goss. It's just like, because he was very nice, but it's really weird that I actually have spoken to this man before. And it was really hard to be like, I really liked Eternal Darkness.
Yeah.
But he was as nice as he could be. Like I was very happy with it, but I just thought I didn't know if it's professional to talk about it because it was like a businessy meeting, and nothing ever came of it. But I'm just like, he was very nice to talk to, and he's still kicking it. So, but it'd be really interesting to have him on the podcast. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe I could
Dennis Dyack on here.
I can get an email. You know, people
Right.
get an interview going on there that I could try it out. So, but that's it. So let's do. Well, first let's do what you've been playing. What you've been playing, Tyler?
Destiny. That's it. Literally all of my time that's gaming time is Destiny right now.
All time is Destiny
fully
time.
bought in. We've been raiding. You pulled the awesome weapon yesterday. It's been great, but that's it. My week has been uninteresting beyond the fact that I've just been playing way too much Destiny.
I feel so bad because you're the one that's done all this research and like LFG'd with random people to do the ribbon cheese, and then I do it with you one time and I get the voice. But that's the way
That's the way it's RNG. That's the way it goes.
That's the way silly RNG works. And I told Tyler I will always be here now to help him get this gun, because everyone should get this gun on our team.
That's all I ask. That's all I ask is that you be available occasionally to give it another shot, because I'll get it eventually.
Our guardians will be holding hands in front of Riven's dead face, hoping to get this gun made from her bones, I'm guessing.
Yep. What do you play?
I've actually played Destiny with you, but I've also, with my brother, have played a new survival, not really new for most people, it came out a while ago, but I just started playing Raft with my brother, which is a survival game where you're building a raft and you stop at islands and you get resources and you make the raft bigger and nicer and cosmetically beautiful and you go fishing, and it's fun. We played about like 6 or 7 hours of it over the course of the week, and I had a really good time. So yeah, it's just a fun little survival game. If you're into that kind of thing, my brother really, really likes survival games. And I like them too. So we just play them together, and that's kind of our thing we do. So Raft, check it out. There's a shark that follows your raft and attacks it. So it's very intense in the beginning. And then you get more and more stuff and it feels less scary. You can kill the shark and then eat it. And where its head is a hat, which is what I do. Yeah. So check out Raft. But now let's do some emails. We got some spooky memories.
You want me to read the first email here from Mark?
Yeah, sure.
All right, Mark says, "Hi, Mike and Tyler. Much like Tyler, I have a spooky childhood memory of playing a non-scary rare game. In Donkey Kong 64, there's a level where Diddy Kong goes into a dark temple to get a golden banana. As soon as Diddy's victory animation ends, a deep, menacing voice growls, 'Get out!' and a target appears on Diddy. You then get a countdown to run out of the temple before this unseen presence shoots you. I'm clearly not the only 12-year-old scaredy cat who jumped out of their seat when this happened." And then he links the YouTube video. "Enjoy the spooky season, Mark." And he says, "P.S. My friends and I all pronounced it Missing No as if it were a name."
Yes, Team Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. I remember that part in Donkey Kong. It was kind of scary.
Yeah, it sounds super spooky. Anytime where you like get a scary voice that says "Get out," it's just like, no, I'm not into that.
Yeah.
That's a great memory. All right, his one's from Mo. Here we go. Spooky gaming moments. Hey, dudes, it's Mo. I am not really into intense horror games either, but a few spooky gaming moments did come to mind. I am a big Bethesda fanboy, so of course I thought of Fallout 3 and Oblivion. Mild spoilers ahead. There are two distinct moments in Fallout 3 that low-key terrified me the first time I played through the game. Finally exiting the vault at the beginning of the game is very tense. There is so much mystery and suspense building about what the post-apocalyptic world is going to be like in the game building up to that moment. I had no idea what to expect. When I opened the vault door for the first time, I was afraid of everything that moved for a good while, especially since I somehow missed Megaton and wandered right into the abandoned town of Grey Ditch, which was swarming with huge fire-breathing ants. Also, the first time I ventured into the underground subway tunnels was extra spooky. The sound those ghouls make puts me on edge. I 100% agree. Yeah. The ghouls in the subway are very scary in Fallout. Definitely. I should have thought of that. That's a very scary memory. Okay. Oblivion is less spooky overall, but I still remember how I felt the first time I entered one of those portals into the plane of Oblivion. Everything is dark and red and dangerous looking. They did a great job of creating an otherworldly hellscape. It was very eerie, and I always tried to complete the Oblivion segments as quickly as possible so I could get back to the peaceful hills of Cyrodiil. Thanks for making our Mondays better. Shelob Glutes. That's a Lord of the Rings reference. That's great. Mo. Thank you, Mo. Thanks, Shelob Glutes. I actually got a Lego set of Shelob. I got a giant spider Lego set that I'm going to build at some point. So thanks, Mo. Those are both very scary. I did not like the Oblivion moments in Oblivion either, which is funny because it's the namesake of the whole game and I didn't enjoy it. I was very nervous when I was there. Also, I had a thing about like carrying items with me so much. You know, having a full inventory. Like, you got to pick up everything. So I couldn't go back. It was frustrating me.
What about the cheese wheel dungeon? What if I'm going to need all these cheese wheels for the cheese wheel
Everyone
dungeon?
needs these cheese wheels.
We got one short one here from Jay. It says, "Love the cast. It has helped me over the years. You guys are awesome." Thanks, Jay. You're awesome, too.
Thanks, Jay. You're the best. Thank you. It's so nice. Just to say that little tidbit. It felt good.
Yeah.
Okay. This next one is from Rude Days 93. It says, "My most recent scary moment in video games" is its subject. "Hey, Mike and Tyler. This is Rude Days 93, and it's been a long time since my last email, episode 100, I think. Dang. But I have been keeping up with every one of your episodes. It has been a great way to get through the horrors of Mondays." That's true. The Monday is the real spooky season. Yep. Okay. "Listening to your last episode, I wanted to shout out a couple of recent scary moments I had in games. Both of these coming surprisingly from the newest Tomb Raider trilogy. Slight spoilers ahead for these games. So the first moment comes in the second game of the series, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and it's in the 2 DLC. The first DLC has you walking around as Laura in her father's abandoned mansion. Now, there is no zombies, ghosts, etc. in this DLC, but have you ever walked around a large abandoned mansion at night with a storm going on, trying to solve puzzles and having to go down into the very dark basement, and for the first time in a Tomb Raider game not having a gun or bow to make you feel safe? Yeah, that does sound really scary.
That's like what Amnesia is when I was talking about that. It's like very much you're wandering around this like mansion. It's very spooky.
Too spooky for us. Okay, now it goes on to say, now in the second DLC, you get to get a gun and you're back in the mansion. But this time there are zombies in the mansion and a whole damn lot of them. The first DLC I finished, but the second one I quit after my first death by zombies. Yeah, that sounds scary. My next scary moment comes in the last game of the series, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. The game takes place in the Amazon jungle and it's really beautiful. You'll find a lost city with natives in the game that are having trouble with some baddies, but they're like your local thugs, not scary at all. But then, in the middle of the game, you're sent to a deep, dark cavern where you're attacked by other natives, and while the game doesn't say it, you do get the feeling that these are cannibals. These baddies act more animal than human, and while solving puzzles to get out of this place, you flash your light and see them crawling up walls, sneaking in the shadows. If you've ever seen the horror movie The Descent, it's basically a movie scene from that. Ooh. As you probably know, Laura has to squeeze through the most tiniest of spots, and as a pretty big guy, has already made me nervous. Then being chased by presumed cannibals just adds more fear and tension to the fire. Oh yeah, that sounds awful. I would never want to play that. There's more scary moments in this trilogy, a lot you wouldn't expect, but I've been having a blast playing through them all, and I highly recommend buying the trilogy collection that includes the DLC for a very low price if you haven't played these games yet. Sorry for the long email. I look forward to your next episode and every episode after. Before I go, though, if I can suggest a possible future topic to the ever-growing list, and that would be Konami Kojima history.
That's a good one.
You guys cover many video games, but it would be interesting to hear about one of video games' most famous developers, and how his start and then feud with Konami kind of took over the news cycle in the gaming world. Stay safe and healthy. Rude Days 93. You know, I've had like a real wishy-washy relationship with Tomb Raider because as a kid, I had Tomb Raider and I got a bugged copy. And so ever since then, I've been like so apprehensive to play Tomb Raider. I don't know why it's like still, it was a 1 in a million chance or whatever, you know, just a fluke that this disc was all messed up, you know?
Yeah.
But I really need to give these new Tomb Raider games a shot. I've heard they're really good.
Me too.
And so, yeah, this is a good reminder. Thank you, Rude Days. That's great. You want to read the last one from Phil?
Yeah, last one from Phil here. He says, the subject is Spooky VR. Phil says, hey there, Phil from Ohio here. I just completed listening to your Spooky Moments episode and can totally relate to 8-year-old Tyler who was spooked out at Banjo-Kazooie and Pokemon. I'm also not a huge fan of horror games, but I have to say, if you want to be scared, PlayStation VR can really do the trick. Just put on that VR headset and start walking to the Resident Evil house. I don't have the fortitude to actually beat that kind of game, but sometimes on an October night, it's just fun to creep through the house. However, the best relatively small dosage of creepy in gaming in a VR setting, IMHO, is Batman Arkham VR. I want to try that. I've never tried Arkham VR.
I haven't either.
I haven't done PlayStation VR at all, I don't think. Anyway, Phil says, if you have never played it through, I really don't want to spoil it. All the levels are relatively short, and it's pretty easy to get through in a night or two. But one level in particular was such a surprise and so creepy that I would put the lights out and ask my friends and relatives, non-gamers, to give it a try. So much fun to watch their reactions. Some say it's way too short, but to me the compactness adds to the fun. Kind of like walking through a haunted house. You know the end isn't too far. That's it. Thanks again for keep on keeping on, Phil. I have a guess at what that segment probably is, especially if it's based on the first Batman Arkham game. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't played the Arkham games. Did we talk about the Arkham games on here?
We haven't talked about the Arkham games, but Arkham, those are so good. Those games are so great.
Add it to the list.
I love those. Throw it on the list. It's on our long list. Yeah, didn't they just release Resident Evil 4 for Oculus? I think it just came out.
I think so. I think you're right.
That would be very spooky, I think. VR, I did a VR spooky thing with like one of the, like just a cell phone, you know, in those like crappy cell phone VR headset things. Not, I guess I'm saying crappy, but hey, you know, it worked. It worked. It scared me. So I guess it worked. And my buddy put it on me, and it was just like a scary scene where you're in like a child's bedroom and then something jumps out at you. And I freaked out. It worked. It worked on me.
They got you.
They really got me. So I think I agree with Phil that I don't know if I could do this all the way. But I mean, I thought it'd be really cool. Like the first way I play Resident Evil 4 ever is to do it in VR. That would be a very interesting experience. And I want to know if like the controls are good. I don't see any reviews on it though. I got to look up. I'm just curious to see what it looks like gameplay wise. So, yeah. But
That's all the emails.
That's all the emails. That's all. We got that's a lot of spooky memories. Thank you for the spooky memories. We appreciate it. And next week, I think our plan is just go right back to the book, right?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds like the way to go. We still got several chapters left in The Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2. Buy your copy now so that you can follow along.
Yep. And with that, I think that's going to do it for this episode today. If you want to email us, send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can join our Discord. It's pinned to my Twitter profile at @mecoletta. If you want to get to a link, you can also just send me an email and I'll do that. You can follow Tyler on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or follow us on Spotify. That helps out too. Or just tell your friends about us. That's the best way, honestly, and we really appreciate it. So with that, do you have anything you want to say to the listener before we go, Tyler? Or is that it? That's pretty much it, right?
I think that's it.
So I'm gonna let you. I usually want to say bye to everybody, but this time I want you to do a spooky goodbye because it's Halloween. I'm putting the pressure on you. Okay.
All right.
You ready? It's all you.
Farewell, listeners.
That was really good.
Got him.